Passionate, creative, adventurous, and supportive are some of the words that describe Jeriel Campbell. She is also a doula and the founder, creator, and community lead of the Doula Road Trip podcast. She has been doing this work for over 13 years and can be found sharing her practice and her tips through the podcast Doula Road Trip. Please join me in welcoming to Hot Mama Chronicles, Jeriel Campbell in the house. Welcome.
Hey, Amelia, thank you so much for such a warm and beautiful introduction. Sometimes when you hear your intro, you're like, who are they talking about? Oh, okay, I guess that's me. So
that is you. And so I'm so happy to be in virtual community with you. And so let's get into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start out with our practice of just you sharing your origin story. How was the young Jeriel? What was your journey into this work?
Yeah, origin story is super long. I will try to give you guys the cliff notes. When I was maybe in like the 5th grade, you normally have to do a project or you talk about like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so that always felt like such a big question. So me being me, I started researching and I found out about obstetricians, and I found out obstetricians were doctors that caught babies. I was like, dope, sounds great. They make an impact, they make money, all the things I love, like sign me up. And so I even shadowed a doctor at some point in my high school career, and then fast forward to almost graduating and finding out that doctors do like a decade of schooling and it's a lot of debt. And I was like, okay, cool, no, thank you. So I ended up going to college undecided and finding psychology and some other things. And fast forward to dropping out of college, coming back home and working as a nursing assistant. And I reconnected with a friend from high school. She just so happened to be pregnant with her 4th baby. And so throughout us reconnecting, I ended up being there in the room during the birth of her 1st baby. And I never seen birth before. I had not had my own children. I'm 6 years older than my younger brother. So like I vaguely remember my mom being in labor in like movie like snapshots, but like I don't remember it in any real detail. And so it ended up being way different than what I thought it would be. And I got so excited and lit up. And my boyfriend at the time, now my husband, was like, you sound like you have baby fever. But I was like, I don't really want to have a baby. I want to be connected to this experience in a different way. And so my high school friend, she said to me, you know what, you probably should look into being a doula. And I was like, what is that and how do you spell it? And so in 2015, I did go ahead and do doula training, and I kind of got imposter syndrome. And I was in a world with a lot of women, a lot of white women, a lot of people that had babies, and I just felt like I didn't fit. So I quit. And fast forward to 2017, and I am pregnant with my first daughter. And so, one of the first people that I called was a doula who was a retired nurse who I met, who I absolutely love. Her name is Connie. She's like a member of my family. And she really prepared me and my now husband to have an incredible, powerful, transformative experience through the birth of my first daughter. And that's when I decided I had to do this for other people. I was definitely going to become a doula. It wasn't like bad tacos, like this really was my calling, and I was going to pick up the phone this time. So that's when I restarted my doula business. I got trained all over again and hired coaches and just really dove headfirst in. And so now I'm like, I think about 18 or so birth families supported and half a dozen postpartum families supported in now, and just really, really happy to share with people the power, the transformation that can really be found through birthing your baby and really birthing yourself again.
I love that. And I think it's so powerful. You talk about this notion of calling, transformation, and the birthing process, and that you're almost, when you, as you're giving birth, you're almost being reborn into your next chapter as the mother or the parent that you're going to become. And so in terms of the doula, you shared some about in your introduction, but really, what does a doula do? Like if you're coming in layperson, what does the doula do? How does one go about doing this doula work? And then talk about just, in terms of you mentioned some of your why, but your why in doing the work, especially
Mhm.
for the families, especially the postpartum families, because I think that's so fascinating.
Yeah, so I love to paint pictures and tell stories with analogies. So for me, doulas are like wedding planners, right? So when you're getting married, which I recently did, you're super overwhelmed, right? And so you're like, me and this person who I love, we really want to celebrate this day and make it official. And so you hire a wedding planner because they know the venues, they know the preachers, they know the caterers, they know everything about decorations, and they're going to help you pull off something beautiful and help you manifest your vision and get you out of that like stuck, overwhelmed, fearful sort of place. And doulas do the same thing, but in a different part of your life, right? So I'm a birth doula and a postpartum doula. So I support people who are pregnant and about to have their baby and people who have just had a baby. There are also doulas who support people who decide that they want to adopt babies, for people that are struggling with fertility, for people that have just lost a baby, for people that maybe lost a parent. That's a death doula. And they do come to you and they help you sort out things with like wills and all of those things. So, really, there's a doula for the circle of life. I like to say at any point you can be in life, you can find a doula to guide you, support you, encourage you, and walk with you through a time when it's really uncertain, it's really unknown, and it's really overwhelming. And so that's the beautiful thing about doulas. As far as why I'm a doula, I feel like I didn't pick being a doula picked me. I found out later I actually have a grand midwife in my family. So my great grandmother was actually a midwife, and she caught my granny and all of her siblings. So I think part of it is in my DNA. The other part too is just the fact that I am who I am. So I'm an Aquarius. I really love to marry passion with impact with the work that I do. I've been at every corporate job you can probably think of. I've been a nursing assistant, an insurance agent, a call center rep that scheduled doctor's appointments for hospitals. So I always felt so out of place. And I think it's because of the fact that I'm driven to impact and to coach people. I talk a lot, as you can tell, and I'm a visionary. So being a doula sort of marries all of those things about me, as well as the fact that I'm pretty independent and rebellious and like to start stuff. So being an entrepreneur lends well to that too. So I think the other part of that is that it's a space in life where people are always holding the baby, but people never hold the parents. And so people always talk about like, oh, I'm having a baby, and people rally around the baby. But I feel like the support system and the transition really needs to be around the parents, because so much happens when you're transitioning from maid into mother, in my case, that I was just unprepared for. The emotional side of it, the mental side of it. I look different, I feel different, I'm losing my identity, and you really don't have anybody there to talk to about it, right? And so you can feel other ways besides excited when you're pregnant, and nobody says that, right? And how we prepare when we're first time moms for the birth, like it's the finish line, but it's just the start line. And the fourth trimester is so important, right? So I don't know exactly like why I was picked to go through this journey or picked to be a doula, but I definitely feel a calling just to support families and to make sure that they feel confident, encouraged, inspired, and just to represent birth as something that's not scary, something that doesn't need to be avoided or dreaded, but something that you can really look forward to. So I definitely think the power that I have in my life now is because of the birth that I was able to experience. And I'm super duper blessed and lucky.
That's wonderful. I think in terms of the overarching message in this notion of the fourth trimester is fascinating. And so I
Mhm.
love that you're an Aquarius, because I am too. And I also love that you not only started this practice, but you've created this community. So talk about the
Mhm.
lessons that you've learned about creating your own podcast, and just how you are fulfilling the need for other doulas, and creating space for them.
Yeah. So the Do the Road Trip podcast is actually my second podcast. So I started podcasting during the pandemic. I had been listening to podcasts since 2014 or 2015. Pat Flynn, the Smart Passive Income Show, is like the first podcast that I ever found, and I just thought it was so dope that you could listen to things that really made you feel encouraged and inspired, and opened up your mind to a world that you weren't previously aware of, at least in my case. So I was like, you know what? Podcasting is so dope. And then the pandemic came and I had just trained to be a doula, but doulas were effectively kicked out of the hospital and visitor restrictions got really, really tight. I really wanted to stay connected to this dream and this goal I had of becoming a doula. And so I was like, you know what? This will be the perfect time to launch my very first podcast. So I bought a course on Udemy and I got a little bit of equipment and I launched. And the podcasting world is tough. Like it's tougher to podcast than I thought it would be. Again, because I'm a visionary, I have a great idea and I just start executing. I don't always count up the time or the task or the cost. So I ended up ending the first podcast, which was my podcast directed to expecting parents. And I ended up going back to work. I was working at Amazon, which I absolutely hated. And I was listening to podcasts again, working from like 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to launch another podcast, but this time I'm going to stick with it because it's going to be the podcast that I really wish existed that talked about how to become a doula and the struggles of like starting a business and all of those things. And so now I'm coming from it from a passion perspective. I feel like I have a lot to say and I have this job that I hate again and I want to be reconnected to my dreams. So I went ahead and launched the Doula Road Trip podcast and I was listening to it one day at work and I was like, I can't believe I did this again. And I was like, okay, so how do we really keep it going this time? And so I started interviewing guests and started to just think through like what I really wanted the show to mean and what I wanted it to be, and just to come at it from a perspective of just enjoying it and then also creating the handbook that I wish existed. And so we're a year and a few months in now. It's been downloaded almost over 8,000 times. And so many people are always saying how incredible the podcast is, how motivational it is, inspiring, encouraging, how it brought them back to birth work when they were about to quit. And I can't believe how powerful your voice can be, your story can be, and just following your intuition. And so I'm super duper grateful for everybody that listens and rallies around me and just to support each other and get through what we all want to, which is the life that we dream. So super duper excited about the podcast and the community.
That's awesome. And I love that it's something that, you went back to and you led from a space of passion. So, it's so important, the work that you are doing in terms of being a doula and having your own practice. And I think of just friends that I know that are Black women or women from the African diaspora, and they talk about their really horror stories about how they're not listened to when they go to the hospital, when they're having their babies, or just in terms of just this whole notion of maternal health that's out there, especially for communities of color, but particularly for Black women.
Yeah.
So I wanted to know, in your eyes, what are you hoping to disrupt in this space?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I really do hope that as a part of me being a part of maternal health and the industry, that one day it does look very different, right? You're absolutely right. Right now, depending on where you live in the country, in the United States, as a woman of color, you are 3 to up to sometimes even 20 times more likely to die from childbirth related complications. And as a mom of a Black woman who will maybe one day give birth, I really want my grandchildren to be birthed in an industry that is vastly different than what it looks like now. I want it to be kind. I want it to be welcoming. I want it to be supportive and encouraging. I want us to not be in conveyor belt care, right? Where you spend 10 minutes at a doctor's office, 7 of which is taken by the medical assistant, and the other 3, you see your provider and you have white coat syndrome. So you're afraid and your blood pressure is high and you forgot the questions that you wanted to ask. And you believe that somebody else knows best about you and your body and your baby, and you don't trust your intuition. And those are all of the things that lead to so many traumatizing and negative outcomes. And I really do want people to be advocates for them, for their health, to be evidence-based educated and not just from the blog about the mom that said that she drank this and ate this and ran around 8 times. And for babies not to be rushed, everybody feels like once you're at your due date, it's a ticking time and like baby needs to hurry up and come out. So let me run around the block and drink tea and castor oil and get induced because baby is late. And it's just so many things that I wish would be represented to people. And just more than anything, that birthing people would be allowed to trust their bodies and explore what would be best for them and their family. And I know that there's more of us than there are doctors in the system. And so maybe that's where we start the change, with seeing more of us as the providers. But ultimately, it feels so overwhelming. And like there's so much that has to change in such a small amount of time. And I hope that we get to see that change happen.
I agree. I think, it's interesting for those expected parents or this expecting parents that are listening to the show. What are some of the tips to finding a doula, right? Because to your point, there are so many different doulas for everything. And so what are some of the tips and practices that one should consider if they're going to explore taking on a doula?
Yeah, so before we get into tips, I want to say this: doulas don't save people from bad outcomes. So your provider is responsible for the life of you and your baby. So if you don't trust your provider, if you feel like you can't ask your provider questions, if you feel like I'm going to go with the flow because they know best, then you probably need to start there, because no positive birth outcomes can start without, one, you being educated and you being an active part of this experience. And then two, you having a provider who is on board with what you want to happen with the birth of your baby, right? But when we're talking about looking for a doula, I would definitely say have somebody who is trained, right, and potentially certified, depending on where you're birthing. A lot of us can't get into the birthing facility if we aren't trained and certified. So definitely want to start there. Someone who is taking seriously the education portion and continually educating themselves. I also would say, like, what is the time that this person has available, right? Some doulas are side hustling and hobbying. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if your doula does have a 9 to 5 and they may not be available for your birth, what does that look like? Do they have a backup doula, or what is the plan of action that's going to be implemented if they are unavailable, right? So we definitely want to ask them that. I also want to know, what type of birth outcomes have you supported, right? So maybe I'm preparing for a natural, unmedicated birth, but have you been there for a cesarean? Have you been there for an induction where somebody got an epidural? Because I need you to be well versed, because this could go any sort of way. So I definitely want to make sure that if we do change plans or if something does come up, that you are active, ready, and available for that. I also love doulas with a big network. So I personally host a BIPOC doula meetup locally every single month in Cleveland. So I know doulas, lactation consultants, midwives, chiropractors. And so I can give you recommendations and I can tell you things that Google can't. And that's what you want from your doula, right? Like, you can get on Google yourself and look for somebody if you needed them. But what you need to know is, okay, is this person kind? Are they polite? Are they going to care for me the way that you would care for me? So those are the things that I would suggest. I will also say too, don't rule out doulas who haven't had children. A lot of the providers who support people have not had children, and having a birthing experience does not make you a fantastic doula or a terrible doula or whatever the case may be. So a lot of people are like, I don't want the doula who has never had kids, or I don't want the doula who has not been a doula yet. A lot of us have been doulas all of our lives, but we just started calling ourselves doulas and moving into formally putting our services out there. So definitely give people a chance. I will also say, don't be afraid to invest in your doula. So it's going to be an investment. It won't be the cost of a wedding, but it's definitely going to be a significant investment for a good doula. And so put that person on your gift registry, save up for that person, move out some of the things that you probably won't need, like that extra bottle warmer or the $5,000 crib, and allocate some of those funds to investing in the experience that you're going to remember for the rest of your life. And that will be the plateau for which you can stand to be a better person, a better partner, better at your job, better in your life overall. So when you start to think about it that way, no amount of money is big enough for what doulas do. So just want to throw that out there too.
That's great. And I love the idea of adding the doula to the registry. That's major key alert. So I think, in terms of your work, Jeriel, what's the best part about being a doula?
I think the best part about being a doula is people actually feeling and seeing a transformation, accomplishing things that they didn't think that they could. When you have someone that's like, oh, I really want to go after this goal, but I don't really think that I can. And everybody's like, okay, so how is this going to turn out? And then people turning around to say, like, oh my gosh, this was so incredible. Like, I'm the only person in my friend circle to have had a positive birth, an unmedicated birth, or whatever the manifestation of that vision looks like. And to really truly be able to see them stand in that power and see them do something that they didn't think that they could do before. So the transformation all day for me is the best part.
That's awesome. You talked a bit about this, but in terms of going, through your own path to being a doula,
Mhm.
if you can just, for those who are considering, striking out there, doing their own business, what were some of the lessons that you learned in terms of really crystallizing, you starting, you, whether it was with the podcast or building this community and this monthly pop-up, what were some of the lessons that you honed and you learned that could be takeaways for the audience?
I think that when you imagine things and the way that things will work out, they rarely work out the way that you imagine, but that they always do. So I would just say keep at it no matter what. Running a business took more money than I thought that it would. So at the beginning of running a business, you're like, okay, like I'm not really sure what I do or what steps I take. For me, that looked like filing an LLC and getting an EIN number, opening up a business bank account, and all of those things are fantastic, and you definitely should do that as a new entrepreneur. But I think what's vitally important is figuring out your marketing plan and what you are going to do to consistently get clients and consistently get in front of clients. Because if it is your full-time thing, you know that if you're not booking clients, then you're not making money and you're not making an impact, right? And both of those things are equally as important. And so just figuring out like, okay, how am I going to consistently get out in front of people? For me, it's a little bit hard because even though doulas are getting more popular, there's still a ton of people that don't know what doulas are. They don't know what we do. They're still trying to figure out, if I have a doula, do I need a midwife, right? So they're still kind of foggy about the role and why we make a difference. Some people have heard that doulas are fantastic, so they reach out to us and they're just like, I don't really know what y'all do, but I've heard good things. So they're coming into it just waiting for us to tell them what we do and how we work and to deliver on the transformation that they're looking for. And so for a lot of other people, they haven't ever heard of us, right? And so they're like, I'm doing the gender reveal in the maternity photography, but I've never heard of doulas before. So you do have to hustle to really educate people about what it is that you do, and sometimes that you even exist, how you impact them, what problem you can solve, and what transformation. And so if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to get over yourself. For me, I didn't want to put my face on my website and I didn't want to go live on social media. And because I'm not, Target or Walmart or Kim Kardashian, like I don't have this big machine that's like pushing people to my business. And so that does mean that you do have to get out in front of people in some way, shape, or form. And if you don't want to get on social media, then you probably have to invest in something like SEO or, something that costs a little bit more to make sure that you are constantly popping up. So I think too, as an entrepreneur, like it's hard to believe that like you can't DIY everything. And I know the budget says DIY everything because a lot of us are starting out and we're bootstrapping, but we're not the best person to handle every task. I'm a visionary. I'm terrible at like admin things and spelling and all of the other crap. Like I just want to think of the dope things and have them pulled off by a team, right? So that's what I'm working towards. But for sure, just being aware of your strengths and your weaknesses and knowing that like if you try to DIY everything, you're probably going to end up in more trouble than if you just would have invested the money, especially when it comes to things like contracts and taxes. And I just want people to be aware of that. And a lot of people are wondering like why their business isn't going the way that they imagine, and it's because you are trying to DIY everything instead of investing into the professionals when it's appropriate and reinvesting into the professionals when it's appropriate. So definitely you can learn some things from Google. It's super slow. So set your expectations accordingly and invest into the right coaches and CPAs and partners to get you where you really need to go. Growing anything is always a team sport. It's never a solo sport. And I think somebody said, if you want to go far, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's so true, even about business.
That's great. That's wonderful advice. And I love that quote, by the way. And so I think as we sit in this space, there have been obviously the impact of COVID-19, which you lifted in terms of doulas experiencing that shutout from the healthcare system.
Mhm.
And then the multiple pandemics that have come from that, right, with regards to, social justice, racial, the systemic racism, and obviously the mental health piece that I think we're still grappling with, even as the pandemic goes to this endemic phase. So
Mm.
if you can lift up in terms of what you're seeing in the community for doulas that are coming into the space that you're holding space for, how have you seen doulas pivot during this time, and
Mhm.
how are they taking care of themselves?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I feel like it's hard when you're in the industry that we're in where you give support out to people all the time. It's really hard, especially for me too, to think about pouring back into myself and how you can really fill your own cup before you fill other people's. I think taking a break is always a good idea. I recently went to like Atlanta for my 32nd birthday. I told you guys I'm an Aquarius. So my birthday was the 16th of February. So spending days away in Atlanta where I wasn't a wife and I wasn't a mom and I was just left to explore the city and enjoy. Like that's always fantastic. I go to the chiropractor. So last year, I think it was, when I finally started going to the chiropractor. Like I tell all my clients, chiropractors help you have feel better and help you have shorter, beautiful births. And I had never been to the chiropractor before. So I started going and it's actually a game changer in therapy. Therapy has been a game changer for me too. I started going after being depressed for a really long time and just not really knowing it. I was depressed during my pregnancy and through my daughter's first year of life. And then I have a really, really good friend, my best friend, his name is Leon, and he just kept like tugging on me, like, when are you going to therapy? When are you going to therapy? And I think therapy is like one of the most underrated tools of adulthood. So and just sometimes just getting outside, feeling sunshine, playing a good song, like all of those things really help. As far as pivoting for doulas, yes, I feel like we are pivoting. So one of my doula friends is a virtual doula. So she does support her clients 100% online. I'm moving towards that model too, where it's more hybrid, where I am doing more of coaching and consulting online so I can reach more people and help more people, because not everybody lives next to a doula who can run with them to the hospital. And if we're being honest, it's hard to be able to give that much of your time and energy to people in a way where you are committing to drop everything in your life at any moment and run with them to the hospital. And so it's much more sustainable and much more impactful to be able to help people before they get to the point where they're in labor. That way they know what to do and they could be, the advocates of their birth and have that positive experience manifested no matter who's in the room. So that's where the power lies. So definitely pivoting towards virtual doula work and being able to really educate people and share information with people that will be able to transform them.
Love that. And I think, so all the entrepreneurs I've spoken to, before the pandemic, like the idea of always innovating in your business and always pivoting is just a muscle that you flex. So I
Yeah.
love that it's now like an expectation during this time of uncertainty that that's a muscle that everyone's flexing.
Mhm.
And so in terms of your work, what brings you joy?
I think that coaching just brings me joy. I think that it's one of my gifts. So I'm very easily able to see people's visions and to be able to help them put the pieces into place to manifest it. And I feel like that's really what doulas do. Like, we're master manifestors. And so that's my favorite part about the work that I do, just being able to see people's lives change. I feel like that's what I was missing all of that time in corporate America. Like, where is the job where I'm making this massive impact on people and people are changed for the better? And so I feel like I finally found that. And I feel like that's the best part about being a doula and what brings me like so, so much joy.
That's awesome. And so I started this podcast, Hot Mama Chronicles, as an homage to the women who are living in purpose, on purpose, flaws and all. That's what a hot mama is. So I wanted to ask you, there's no right or wrong answer, okay, to the question. Are hot
Okay.
mamas made or are they born?
I think hot mamas are 1,000% born, and I know because I gave birth to one. She's 4. She's a spicy Scorpio. Her sun and her moon sign are in Scorpio. You can't tell her what to do. You can't boss her, no matter how big you are, no matter how much authority you have. She's so free spirited, and she really makes me like think about the time in my life where I used to be like confident and unafraid and fearless. And so I'm super duper grateful for her for that reminder and for her getting me to do my shadow work to come back to that person. So definitely hot mamas are 1,000% born for sure.
I love that. And I love, the fact that you gave birth to a hot mama. So the generation's already being created. Hallelujah.
Oh, for sure.
And so we're now almost into March. We just began March and in 2022. And so I wanted to know if you could talk about what you're excited about, what projects you're working on, and then how people can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there are any expecting moms in the audience, I would love for you to come to my class. I am hosting an absolutely free class that will allow you to see the 5 things that you need in order to experience joy in your childbirth. So you can go to bit.ly/birth in order to access that. And I'll make sure to get the link. That way you guys can access it as well. And my podcast. So the podcast is still going. So the Doula Road Trip podcast for anybody who is interested in becoming a doula or maybe just listening, right, to what's going on and having something new to listen to in your arsenal. We do talk about becoming a doula, but it is a lot about entrepreneurship, starting, growing, marketing your services, and service-based businesses could definitely find a lot that they can take away from the podcast too. So super excited about continuing the podcast. We go every single week. There's 2 episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And so I'm really excited that we are in a new year, that we get to cover new topics and meet new guests. So that's what I have coming up.
That's amazing. And we will link to we'll have show notes and we'll link up for sure all of the important links in the Instagram and all of, the important ways that they can connect with you on social and online. She also has a really cool YouTube channel. So it's on and popping. There's always something that she's doing. And so, this has been a fruitful conversation. I've learned so much. I know the audience has. So as we close, please share just words of wisdom for the audience that you can impart before.
Yeah, I just want everybody to start dreaming and imagining what their beautiful, most amazing version of themselves in their life could be. I feel like so many of us have stopped dreaming, we stopped imagining, and we stopped thinking about the impossible and how we can really manifest that. And so that's what I want everybody to come back to. Like, what's the vision of your big, bright, beautiful life? And how can we work towards manifesting that dream? That dream was put inside you for a reason. It's not going to go away. So we might as well just start working towards it.
A beautiful close to a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Jeriel, for your work and what you're doing to create safe spaces and services for women, but it's particularly women of color, bringing new life into the world and transformation. You can connect with Jeriel Campbell by following her on her Instagram at Doula Road Trip, subscribe to Doula Road Trip podcast, or visiting her Linktree/Doula Startup. Thank you for listening to Hot Mama Chronicles. You can connect with me through my website at ameliaaubrecht.com or subscribe to the podcast on all podcasting platforms. Remember, the road to being a hot mama is about the journey and not the destination. One love.
Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you.